All right. So I have started our recording. Okay, so welcome everybody to Beyond Chicken Nuggets, Strategies for Picky Eaters to Problem Feeders. So meet us, I'm gonna let everybody introduce themselves.
All right, good morning, guys. My name is Regina. I am a speech language pathologist at the Lake Worth Clinic of Progressive Pediatric Therapy. And a little background about me. So I've been working with feeding for a few years now. I really focus on mostly children with autism, kind of like sensory feeding, using behavior strategies to kind of make feeding more fun and not such a stressful environment. And I'm a big proponent for kind of that parent interaction, because guess what? You guys are the ones feeding at home. So I really make it involved. So it's easy for the parents. It's easy for the kids. That's kind of where my passions are with feeding. And I also have a lot of experience in addition to with feeding and autism with AAC devices. So children who have limited verbal communication using other methods to communicate and other kind of behavior, behavior modification strategies and everything to work with when it comes to communication. So I'll lead it over to Miss Melissa.
Hi, everybody. Welcome. Thank you for joining us this morning. I'm Melissa. I am a speech language pathologist in the West Palm Beach Clinic. My experience is with the dysphagia, which is some difficulty with swallowing due to muscle weakness. I also have experience working with different types of feeding disorders as well, heavy including different sensory needs. So really focusing on altering different diet textures for those little kiddos that have some muscle weakness with swallowing. And of course, we are working closely always with parents, occupational therapists, and dietitians to help little ones progress with their eating. I'll lead it over to Teresa.
Hi, my name is Teresa. I'm one of the occupational therapists in the West Palm Beach Clinic. I've been working with feeding for a few years now, mostly with self-feeding, oral motor control, and a little bit of sensory feeding as well. I also have two children myself. One is 5, one is 2. My 5-year-old I would describe as a picky eater. My 2-year-old is a lot more adventurous in what she likes to eat. So I have personal experience with some of the struggles of having a picky eater in a household as well. So I will lead it over to Brittany.
Hi, everyone. I am Brittany, and I'm an occupational therapist who is doing teletherapy and in the community. My feeding experience is helping children get the food to their mouths, also increasing their ability to tolerate different textures, either on their hands or on their face. And so that's my experience. So I think we're gonna get started with everything else.
So what we are learning today, this is kind of a quick overview of things that we're going to be covering. So we're going to start off with the senses and developmental milestones involved with eating. So this will give us a really good foundation of what we can expect at certain kind of stages and ages of our children and those senses that are involved when it comes to eating. We're going to touch on typical eating habits of young children, and then on the flip side, red flags to look out for. So you can kind of identify in your own experience, maybe where your child or the child you're thinking of today, where they might land. And then, of course, what everyone's waiting for, tips and strategies to use right away in mealtime, because what we really want is for you guys to feel empowered today and feel like you can accomplish this, and that if you need resources, you need extra help. We're also going to touch on that if you think that you need additional support. So a pop quiz, because this is an interactive webinar after all. How many senses are involved with eating? So in your chat feature, go ahead and what do you think? How many senses are involved in eating? Do you think A, 7, B, 5, or C, 3? So go ahead and take a guess at how many you think are involved with eating. Doratus at 7. Oh, we got 5. Miss Desra over here saying 5. Oh, Gary, 5. We have Shafia, 5. Excellent. These are all really, really good answers here.
So if you guessed 7, which I believe Dorada did, it is correct. Most people are familiar with the 5 senses. So sight, smell, taste, touch, and hearing. But there are actually 3 other senses that we have. And for feeding, we use 7 of them. So if we want to go to the next slide. So the other senses are interoception, which is awareness of what we're doing inside of our body. So awareness of our bladder and bowels. So if we have to use the restroom, awareness of hunger or thirst, feeling sick, and being aware of our own emotions and our body's response to our emotions. So think about when you get scared, how your body feels, when you're nervous, all of that. And proprioception, which is the awareness of your body in space. Is your child grounded, meaning they're not really moving, they seem firm and like aware of their body in space, and or are they wiggly and like moving around while they're eating, trying to figure out where they are. Proprioception is also being aware of how to bring food to the mouth with either their fingers or utensils, depending on either their age or what they're eating. And then also drinking from an open cup without spilling. Eating is a whole body experience. It is actually one of the most complex things we do as humans, and we are using all of our senses.
Oh, there we go. So let's touch on typical feeding developments of young children. So what we can expect. So birth to 6 months, really they're getting all their nutrition through breast milk and formula. They're drinking from the bottle. So they're drinking from the nipple. What they're learning in that is they're building all that strength, that oral motor strength that they are going to need later on to chew and to manage their food in their mouth. So sucking, even pacifiers, they do have their benefits because we call it non-nutritive sucking helps build some of that strength. So that's what you can expect with feeding for birth to 6 months. Around 6 months to 8 months, that's when you really start adventuring into food that are purees. So really soft, almost to a liquid type formation of the food. We call it like the stage 1, stage 2 purees of baby food, right? Or, you throw peas into a blender, blend it up till it's nice and smooth. That's that puree. Stage 1 is typically a single ingredient food. Stage 2 is typically a little bit more than that. So maybe bananas and oatmeal pureed, or strawberries, bananas, and apples, like, a little bit of a mixture. That's kind of the difference. You always want to start off with a single ingredient, of course, to make sure there's no allergies, no reactions to it before you venture off into mixing those two, because you try something new and mixed it all up and they have a reaction. A lot of our pediatricians guide you just kind of start with those single ingredients before moving up. So the 9 months, this is where our typical idea of eating kind of happens. We call it like the meltable hard solids. So things that they can pop in their mouth. Maybe they can try to chew a little bit, but it's going to dissolve in their mouth. So it's really easy for them to digest. Baby cookies, those dissolvable puff, those kind of baby like Cheerios, graham crackers, those kind of things. Then 10 months, we get those soft cubes. So where a child can, start picking up a little bit larger pieces and managing those larger pieces and managing, hey, that's a lot bigger in my mouth. I need to really control it so I can swallow it safely. So things like avocados, overcooked squashes. So again, things that are going to be really soft once it's in the mouth, and they don't really need teeth to chew. They could gum it and it'll go down. 11 months is what we call soft mechanical. So mechanical is a fancy way of just saying automatic. it's that chewing pattern. Think of a mechanic who works on your car. The mechanics of you is you're chewing and all of that good stuff happening when you're eating. So soft mechanical food. So things that do require some kind of chewing. Again, you don't need too many teeth, but for the most part, they need to kind of munch on it a few times before it's nice and soft before they can swallow and digest it. So things like really thin deli meats, eggs, soft pasta, white bread. So kind of thinking think of the white bread. It's soft enough they can chew, and then swallow. Once we hit that year mark, we got the mixed textures like those macaroni and cheese, chicken nuggets, French fries, all that good stuff that our kids are probably loving, blueberries and peas, a little bit of a mixture. And then we kind of move on to soft table foods. So those are things like steamed vegetables, pasta. So definitely require some chewing, because at that point we should have a lot of our teeth. So chewing should kind of be happening. And then we moved on to hard mechanical. So again, think mechanical, think that automatic chewing. So that's that hard stuff, the crackers, the chips, hard cookies, things they kind of have to break off in order to chew and digest. And then by 2 years old, we should really be safely eating all types of foods, all types of textures, with some wiggle room, because our toddlers are allowed to be a little picky. But yeah, for the most part, they're eating a little bit from each food group: meats, vegetables, fruits, some fun stuff, and definitely a variety of textures: soft, crunchy, harder, steamed, all that good stuff.
So now that we know what some of the different textures are, seeing that, and if you're kind of comparing your own little one to some of those different stages and seeing, hey, they're not really eating those types of food. Every time that I put it in front of them, they're not eating that food. Why aren't they eating it? Well, we're going to talk about some of the different steps that it takes to eating, because it's not just putting the food in front of your kid and saying, put it in your mouth, go ahead, we have to eat this. This is our dinner. Think about if you're visiting another country, and there may be certain delicacies in that country that is not something that you have ever tried before. Are you going to be the person that is super adventurous? You've never seen, just an example, fried insects. And you go to this country and that's a delicacy. Are you going to be the kind of person that immediately someone puts it in front of you and says, here you go, here's our lunch? Are you going to start eating it right away? Probably not. For most people, the answer is going to be no. There's going to be a lot of steps in between that step to actually eating, to actually chewing that food and swallowing it before to make us comfortable to get to that step. So there are, just a brief overview, 6 steps to actually eating a food, but it can really be broken down. Some people even say it's 30 or more steps to actually eating that food. So when we're thinking about kids that are picky eaters or problem feeders, we have to really parse out those steps very carefully. Something like this is going to be called systematic desensitization. So getting that kid comfortable with each step to eating. So the very first step is going to be just tolerating that food. Maybe some of you have experience with kids that they see the food and they immediately have an adverse reaction, whether it's running away from the table, whether it is maybe it's even as extreme as vomiting. So getting to that first step might be a challenge. So just tolerating the sight of a food. So can they be close to the food, or do they have to be in another room? Are other people around the child? Can they tolerate somebody else eating it? Can they tolerate somebody else putting it in their mouth and chewing it? Maybe not. Maybe we have to take that step, even parse that step a little bit smaller. The next step is going to be actually interacting with the food. Are they helping you cook? Are they watching you while you're cooking the food? Are they going to be able to help participate? Maybe they're going to just interact with the spoon push it around in the bowl. Maybe they're going to push it around their plate with a fork. Maybe they're going to be passing the bowl to somebody else. How are they doing with that? We want to pay attention to how they're interacting. If they start grimacing, if they start showing some of those adverse behaviors, which we're going to talk about later on, then we got to take it a step back. The third step on the continuum is going to be smelling the food. So smelling the food while we're cooking. Do we have to contain the smell somehow by putting it in a container so that they are just on that interacting step? Or can we open up that container? Here we have a little kiddo that is bringing it close to his face. So yeah, he's smelling that food. He doesn't know that he's on that step, but he's definitely smelling that food. And smelling a food is how we can determine how it's going to taste in our mouth as well. So that really helps to bring us along the continuum. The next step is going to be touching the food. How are they touching the food? Are they touching it with just one finger? Can they touch it with their whole palm? Can they bring it close to their body? Maybe they're touching it on different parts. Maybe it's climbing up the arm, getting closer to the face. Can they actually touch it to their face? Can they touch it to their mouth? Can they give little kisses to the food? Because bringing it closer to your mouth is, hey, that is one step closer to actually eating the food. And that might be too much for some of our little kids. See how close, take a look at this picture and see how close he's actually bringing it. We're doing some useful play here, because it's not going to be just about play with food, but it's about useful play. So he's bringing it, so it's like his little eyeballs, and he's smelling it, he's touching it. See how close it is to his face. Next step is going to be taste. So with little kids, of course, they're going to get messy, and we encourage that. So the taste, it's going to be getting on their hands, it's going to be getting on their face, and next thing you know, hey, they're tasting that food. Maybe they get adventurous and they're tasting it on their own. Now, the last step is actually eating the food. So that's putting it in the mouth and then chewing it. So we want to make sure that whatever the kid is putting into their mouth is going to be appropriate for whatever stage developmentally that they are at. We don't ever want to give them a food that they're not going to be developmentally appropriate. We always want to make sure that there's going to be adult supervision as well.
All right, so pop quiz. So share in the chat, how many foods does your toddler have to eat to be considered a picky eater? Do you think it's A, 10 foods, B, 30 foods, or C, 50 foods? So go ahead and use that chat feature and share what you guys think. So Dorada thinks it's 30 foods. What does everybody else think for picky eater? Lynn and Gary think it's 10. Desiree thinks 30. So far, nobody thinks it's 50. Shafia thinks 10. All right, well, let's see what it is. So toddlers being picky eaters can be typical, and that means 30 plus foods within their diets from a variety of food groups. So that is considered picky eaters. And that is different than what is considered more of a problem feeder, which is much, much more limited. So for toddler age, 30 plus foods from a variety of food groups is considered typical. And that might include some of those very common kid foods. It may be that they like, chicken and hot dogs, and they like carrots and corn, maybe like peanut butter and jelly sandwiches. And those are all those kind of basic, more, foods, at least, from an American diet. It's very typical for toddlers to want to eat the same foods daily and then stop eating occasionally due to changing food preferences. That's for toddler age, not really that much of a concern. Often any foods that are sort of lost will return, after a 2-week break or so. And that is, again, considered typical for a toddler age. By preschool or kindergarten, we would expect our children to be eating most of what the family is eating. And that includes a variety from all food groups, and to also be participating in regular meal times and snack times with the family. Now, that is also very culture specific too. And if we look at other cultures across the world, their typical diets are going to be very different than maybe the American diet that we experience here. So whatever your culture is within the household, that's what we would expect your preschool or kindergarten age child to be eating with the family. So again, within reason. All right, let's keep going.
So we're going to talk about some of the red flags. So these are some signs that maybe you need a little bit of extra support from a professional. When might it be time to speak with your pediatrician or a specialist about a possible picky eater versus problem feeder, feeding aversion situation? So weight loss, that's going to be a big one. If your child is not gaining weight, if they're not in the correct weight range where they should be, that there may be a variety of factors leading to that, but we always want to keep that in mind when it comes to eating. So even if you're trying to supplement with protein shakes, different high calorie drinks, and your child is just not gaining weight, or they're staying at the same weight, or if they're losing weight, that's going to be a huge red flag. If a child is avoiding an entire food group or an entire food texture, for example, what we saw with Regina, a crunchy food, if they have really a lot of difficulty, they're just not moving up to that crunchy food, or they're not moving up to a more chunky puree, that can be a red flag also. If there is a lot of crying or different types of behaviors during feeding time, such as turning away, turning the head away, turning the whole body away, pushing the food away, pushing their whole body away from the table, getting up and running away from the table when presenting certain foods. For littler ones, if you're noticing that they're arching their back, if there's any sort of wet vocal quality with crying or with talking, just kind of that gurgly sounding voice, that's going to be a big red flag. Maybe a kid might, like I spoke about before, if they see a food, they start gagging or vomiting, even with the smell or the sight of the food. If it gets closer to them, that's a red flag that something else might be going on. Holding the food, sometimes people call it pocketing the food, like little chipmunks just in the mouth. And then you're noticing, oh wait, they're just holding it in their mouth. They're not actually swallowing it. What's going on? That's going to be for more than a minute. If you're noticing that. Longer meal times is also a big one. If a kid is taking more than 30 to 45 minutes just to finish a meal, a lot of kids are going to have 5 different times for meals. They have breakfast, lunch, dinner, but also snack time. And think about if that is 30 to 45 minutes of time, that's taking up a big portion of the day. That's not efficient eating. If a kid is grazing, if there's a food bowl and they're just constantly picking up those Cheetos, they're picking up that fruit pouch, that sucking fruit pouch, but they're not sitting down and actually eating a meal with the family. Or if they need a distraction. So a lot of times we'll hear, oh, my child is only going to eat if I put an iPad in front of them. I have to distract them in order to feed them. Otherwise, they just won't eat. If your child has any of the following or a few of the following present, definitely reach out to a specialist, reach out to your pediatrician and talk about it, because there might be something else going on.
So now the part everyone's been waiting for, we're going to start going over different strategies to help you navigate how to help your child become a more adventurous eater.
So food exploration is one of the best ways for kids to start tolerating new foods. We want to make feeding fun. So we are going to have your child play with toy food and pretend to eat it and making positive comments like, yum, this food is so delicious. Also, oh, I like how you brought that food up to your mouth, even if they don't eat it. I brought some fun like props to kind of illustrate some fun ways to play. So also having your child use real food to feed their favorite stuffed animal or doll. If your child's not tolerating holding a new food, you could also use the pretend food, have them like get used to doing the pretend play, and then work your way up to having them use real food. And also just being like, oh, I like how you fed Fancy Nancy the corn. Oh, I wonder how it tastes. I wonder how it smells. And just making it really fun and positive. Also at the table, you could have your kid's favorite toy, or in this example, the toy shark, have it at the table and have them using a fork or their hand or whatever, having them feed that toy at the table and commenting and talking about it the whole time. Like, oh, the toy shark ate the broccoli. Oh, look, mommy's eating the broccoli. And just making it very positive and fun and engaging. And this also does depend on the child's age. So we don't want to be doing play that's not appropriate for, like, if you're having a child that's like 6 or 7 or 8, would have to engage in different ways. But for the younger ones that are in the pretend play, this is great. So pop quiz. When can my child start helping prepare meals in the kitchen? So let's put our answers in the chat box and we shall see. Heather says 2. Desiree says 2 as well. Those are coming in fast. Gary says 5 and Dorada says 2. So the answer is actually 2. You can have so you can involve your child in preparing meals as early as 2. Have them help find foods in the grocery store, or help you unload the groceries into your fridge or pantry. So you can even remark like, oh, the eggs are cold, so we're going to put them in the fridge. And just modeling and like having your child learn about the foods that they're going to be presented is really important, because unfamiliar foods can be scary to kids. Have your child find ingredients needed to cook and bring to the counter. They can throw away or compost the fresh food scraps. Have them help prepare meals in age-appropriate ways. So preschoolers can stir with a spoon in a pot. Toddlers can mix salad in a bowl, or put cut up fruits and veggies into a bowl. Elementary age kids can cut fruits and veggies with a safe kitchen knife, which I actually have an example of right here. I've actually started with my 3-year-old using these salad knives to help start prepping food. She will help me cut zucchini. She'll help me cut up fruits and all of that. So as long as you feel comfortable, and depending on your child's skill level, you can even use some of these strategies like using the salad knives, because I mean, they're not going to hurt you. You can use them at whatever age or stage you're comfortable with. This all provides more opportunity for sensory experiences with new foods. So like Melissa was saying, with the smell, when you're cutting up zucchini, or you're cutting up a fruit, or you're having to throw away the scraps, you're getting that smell, you're getting that sight, and also it's presenting it in a different way. A lot of times children want it a specific way visually, and once you take a bite, your food changes shape, and we want to expose children to those different visuals. A child who engages with food is more likely to be open to trying it. So let's get your kids in the kitchen helping you cook, because it's part of family time and it's such an important life skill. So sensory play. This is my favorite. Having your child get messy with the food. Look at that picture. I mean, I'm sure all of us have a picture of our kids or our grandkids or nieces and nephews where they're covered in food. This is such an important part of the food process and being able to tolerate different textures in eating. So you could have your child use their hands to explore the food, like mashed potatoes or spaghetti, and it doesn't matter how old they are. They don't have to still be in that little infant stage sitting in a high chair. You can put a towel down underneath their chair or go outside and be like, all right, today we're going to play with mashed potatoes. Let's draw pictures. Let's do all of those different things. Let's make a mashed potato sandcastle. Just making it fun for them to be able to tolerate it on their hands, the smell, using all of our senses while we're playing with our food. So if your child is avoiding touching the food with their hands, have them try to use a fork or a spoon instead first. You can also make it super fun by introducing new utensils that you might not typically have or you have in your pantry, but your child might not typically use for feeding. I have these really fun chopsticks, and which I just dropped, but it makes it more fun for the kids to want to try to play. You can have them be like, oh, let's write with the chopsticks. And then, oh, can we paint our arm with the chopsticks? So getting it to be fun and engaging to introduce these new foods. Teresa did say, pro tip, dollar store shower curtains make great floor coverings for messy food play. Yes, it's so super easy to just pick that up and wash it off so you don't have to worry about the food covering your house. But yes, let's get our kids being messy with their foods. It's such a good learning experience for them.
Okay, so going back to some of those baby steps to eating, kind of bringing it together now. So as I spoke about before, if you start to notice that you are trying out a new step, if you're trying out the interacting step with your child, you're trying to get them to maybe use those chopsticks to push the food around the table, and you're noticing that they start to grimace or they're starting to push away, take notice of that. Seeing how your child is reacting to the foods is going to be really important, because you never want to push your child into that zone of uncomfortability. You never want to surprise your child either with a food that they're not going to be ready for. So trying to sneak in that crushed up broccoli into a soup or something like that. Well, okay, so you're trying to get them to have that vegetable, you're trying to get that nutrients in, but in the long run, that's not going to be very sustainable. That's not going to make them appreciate broccoli or green foods, because guess what? They don't know what's in there. That's not going to be a functional, that's a short fix. That's not going to be a functional idea for them down the road, because once they start to become more independent with food preparation, who's going to sneak in that broccoli into their soup after a while? Nobody. So getting them comfortable at each step is going to be very important. So if you're starting to notice that going to that step is too much for them, then let's take it down a notch. So it can take, keeping in mind, it takes 20 times of exploring a new food before a child will decide, let me go on to that next step. So it's not just about successfully eating it, but it can be 20 times before they might go to the next step. And that can seem intimidating, but you really want to think about the long run here. You want to think about being consistent and being persistent as well. So if your child's not able to even tolerate the sight of the food? Well, maybe you just have to start by talking about it a lot, making it more acceptable. They're hearing about it a lot. And then we can start to just point it out in the grocery store. Oh, we're not going to bring it home. We can just point it out in the grocery store. There it is. All right, we'll walk past it. That's fine. So if your child's, so once they get to that interact with, maybe they're not able to directly interact with it with their hands yet. So picking that utensil, or as I said before, putting it in a different container so that they can shake it. They can listen to how it sounds. And maybe somebody else is going to take that next step and open it and smell it, or open it and take it out with a spoon. So maybe they're just starting to watch somebody else move to the next step, whether it's interacting with it, whether it's kissing it, and always giving the child that choice. So, what should we do? Should we touch it? Should we smell it? And if they don't want to do it, then you can take that role onto yourself, because maybe they just need to watch you do it a few times before they get comfortable. Remember, it's a system. It's systematic desensitization. So we're going through this system step by step to desensitize a child that's having a difficult time getting to that next step. So we have to pay attention and break it down exactly where, at which step we need to break it down, and paying attention to some of those red flags as well. So we want to really keep it simple here. So we're not going to introduce a million different foods at once and try to get them to interact with and smell and touch all of these new foods. So if you have a very picky eater, maybe it's about just trying to go through those steps with one food. Now, one thing to keep in mind, when your child is hungry, they're going to be more apt to move forward with that continuum because they're hungry, because they want to eat. So doing an afternoon snack or lunchtime, that's going to be a great time for your child to try some of those new foods that you're introducing. You really want to make sure that they're having that energy, but they're not tired. It's not their nap time. So we're thinking about our children as a whole. So what else? We learned about those different senses. What else might be going on? Are they tired? Do they have to go to the bathroom? Are they feeling like they have an upset stomach? Maybe they're feeling a little bit wiggly, and maybe they need a little bit of extra support underneath their feet or on the sides of them to help them feel a little bit more secure before they're able to try that food. Also, another thing to keep in mind, when you're constantly introducing new foods, your child is getting more and more opportunities to explore with the food. So maybe you're trying something new. Maybe you're trying to cook your pasta in a different way, or maybe you're trying a different form of pasta. Maybe you're trying a penne pasta instead of the angel hair, or maybe you're going to try pasta spirals. So even introducing that, it can be considered a new food. So keep that in mind. It's not that it's pasta that they don't like. Maybe it's the shape of the pasta that they don't like. And guess what? That's a new food. If it's a different color sauce, that's a new food. Sometimes for kids, having it on a different plate makes it seem like it's a new food, or having it cut up differently can make it seem like it's a new food. So keeping all of that in mind, bringing it back to the basics, keeping it simple whenever you're introducing things, but never forcing, allowing for opportunities.
Okay, so Desiree just asked a really great question. I want to get to that a little bit more towards the end. And let's talk about mealtime routines first. Mealtime routines are very, very, very important, and this kind of ties into, Desiree, to your question. eating is a very socially interactive experience. When we are eating, we also are modeling to each other about the process of eating. So it's so important to have a consistent mealtime routine, and having a mealtime routine with your child involved, and with the parents involved, anybody involved. How this relates to Jezreel's question, she mentioned that, he goes to preschool during the day, so she packs his lunch, he eats it at school, so she's not sure how to introduce new foods, in that type of situation. However, when he's at school, he's eating lunch around a variety of other kids who, if everyone's bringing their own lunch, they're all bringing different things to the school as well. So he is getting some of that social modeling at school. So it could be a place to pack a newer food in his lunch as an option for the teachers to present to him. And if he has, say it's strawberries. If he doesn't care for strawberries, but you're packing a little container of strawberries, and he's seeing that maybe Billy across the table from him also has strawberries, and he's eating his strawberries, then he may be more likely to kind of check out his own strawberries and model what he sees Billy do. So back to these mealtime routines within the home. Brittany already mentioned a little bit about this, having your child assist in the mealtime planning and preparation. The mealtime planning allows your child to make decisions as part of the meal planning process. So it could be as simple as how they want their food presented. Do you want your sandwich whole or cut? Or it could be a little bit more complex of, let's make pasta tonight. Help me pick out the kind of sauce we should use. So having them a part of that process, or, do you want chicken or pork with our dinner tonight? Do we want to have fish tonight instead of chicken? So having them involved in those decision-making process, even if it's not a food they're currently eating, let them help decide what the meal is going to be. And Brittany already talked about, how kids can be involved in the meal preparation process by using, younger kids can help simply opening packages, getting the food from the fridge, taking like the food scraps and putting it in the garbage or in the compost pile, however your family does that. Younger children can mix the salad bowl, and then older children can be more involved in, working at the stove or doing any of the cutting preparation. And Amazon has wonderful, these are nylon knives. So, you're not going to cut yourself, but these are actually very effective at cutting vegetables and fruits. So those younger kids can participate in cutting in that preparation process. I love this picture in the slide. This is not our picture, just a picture I found, but I have no idea. He may not be eating those Brussels sprouts, but he is so excited to help spread the olive oil on it to cook. So because he gets to do that part of it, most likely he will be more interested in checking out what that end result is, how it looks, how it feels, and how it tastes. So those are just very simple ways to get your child involved in that process. Let me go to the next slide. The other part of mealtime routines is consistency. Having a consistent scheduled time, giving a 5-minute verbal warning. So it's, especially if meal times tend to be a little more stressful for your child and for the family in general, if they are having a tough time with certain foods, giving that 5-minute warning so it's not just an abrupt, okay, TV off, toys down, time to eat. Let them sort of be aware that, hey, in 5 minutes, dinner's going to be done, then we're going to go to the table and we're going to eat. You can have a transition activity. Washing hands is great. It's, just good hygiene in general, but part of getting to wash your hands, getting to engage in just, some sensory play with the soap prior to that transition to the table is just a nice activity to help them sort of prepare for what's going to be coming up. Getting your child involved in the table preparation process. So bringing in the plates, cups, or napkins, or letting the child also plate their own meals or plate the meals of the family as well. It allows them to have that interaction with food without necessarily having to touch it. So getting to scoop or getting to use a fork to stab to pick up pieces of food and place it on the plate. And they get to have that interaction with those foods that they otherwise may not be interested in interacting with. But if they're doing it for mom or dad, to help mom or dad, they'll be more likely to do that, get that exploration in and interaction. We do suggest that, you know, always have one preferred meal or one preferred food available within a meal. Just so at least there is something that you know for sure your child is going to eat and enjoy, and then let them kind of explore some of those foods that they aren't as interested in. Eating together to model good eating habits. It's important at home, it's important at school. You oftentimes, when a child starts going to school, they start to open up sort of their food exploration abilities because they are around all the other kids in the classroom, and they all eat lunch together, and they all get to see what everyone's bringing. And like I mentioned earlier with Desra's question, you know, your child gets to see, like, well, the child sitting next to them maybe brings, you know, a ham sandwich, and they only like turkey, but they get to start seeing, like, oh, there are different things, and they're eating it, and they're having a positive response, you know, a positive response by eating their lunch. So they're more likely to want to try because they see other people doing it as well. Have your child involved in clearing the table. Having them, you know, throw the food scraps that are left over on the plate away is just another food interaction opportunity. And allow them to do that even for those non-preferred foods, because it is just about those opportunities to interact. Before we move on, I wanted to talk a little bit about, you know, setting your child up for success when they are eating. And an important part of that is utensils and cups, and having the appropriate utensil and the appropriate cups, you know, for the child. I didn't put that in the PowerPoint, but I thought about that later. So on the market, you have lots and lots and lots of toddler spoons, toddler forks, child spoons, you know, different size cups. And it can't be overwhelming. Like, what do you really get? You have things like this one, which is it's a plastic fork. So of course you think, like, oh, my kid is not going to hurt themselves with it. It's plastic, right? You've got ones that have a little bit thicker handle with metal prongs. You have spoons with a thicker handle that are metal. You have spoons that are plastic. And then of course we have these wonderful, these are really for infants. So, and for the caregiver to feed, which is why they have the longer handle. In my experience, and feel free, any of the other presenters, to share your experience, I have found with my own children and with children that I work with that the metal prong fork tends to be the superior fork. The worst thing you can do is give your child a fork that they're trying to pick up the food and they just can't get it on the fork. And they're struggling, and especially if it's a food that isn't necessarily their favorite, maybe it's a food that is just an okay food in their eyes, then we're not setting them up for success by giving them a utensil that they're struggling to manipulate the food with.
Just to add to what Teresa was saying, I found with my own daughter that some of her fine motor skills were just a little bit lacking. So what I would do is I would preload her fork or her spoon, still giving her an opportunity to try, but we don't, at meal times, especially with those I like it but not a lot kind of foods, you want to not have them become frustrated. So I would give her an opportunity, but then I would also be like, oh, here's this fork already ready. Oh, here she is. But I just wanted to add that off of what Teresa said.
Yes, great point. And you always have to kind of determine where your child is developmentally as well. If they are able to successfully load their own spoon or fork, or if they're not quite there yet, you're going to help them do that, but then letting them bring to mouth. And same with the spoon. If they're, give your child a spoon, let them try, let them dip, but if they're really struggling, step in and help them out So mealtime is not a time of frustration because of the fine motor components, and that the focus is really on, trying these foods, these new foods, or these preferred foods, or maybe these foods that are just okay. As far as cups, there's lots of sippy cups and lots of straw cups in the market. I'm not going to talk about the non-spill. I just want to share a little bit about when you're starting to introduce an open cup, because non-spill cups is a whole nother presentation in itself. But when you're working with open cups with your child, you want to really match the size of the cup with the size of the child. And what I mean by that is, if you're giving your child, I brought this cup as an example. I mean, this is a pretty big open cup. If you're giving this to say like a 2-year-old or a 3-year-old, this is significantly big. The opening is huge. So when they go to try to drink from this, it's going to flood them. And that's very different than, say, a cup that is more this size. This is about half the size opening. So a smaller opening cup is going to be a lot more manageable for your child when they're working on cup drinking, especially if you're trying to explore different juices or different flavorings with your liquids. With that said, because eating, drinking, all of that is such a social experience, just to share my own personal experience with my children, my 2-year-old is super motivated to drink from my cups. And I'm sure anybody in this presentation who has children, has been around children, have probably seen it too. They're more interested in, Mom, what do you have in that cup? Or Dad, what do you have in that cup? Yeah, see, Brittany, you can't see Brittany right now, but she held up her water bottle that her daughter is always wanting to drink out of. So my 2-year-old really likes wine glasses. So I have these plastic colored wine glasses that she really was interested in them because I have different colors of them. And they were small enough for her to pick up comfortably and drink from. So occasionally, I'll ask her, what cup do you want to use for dinner? And sometimes she'll choose this one, and that's fine. So sometimes it might be sort of out of the box as well. You just kind of follow your child's lead and what is going to make them motivated to try that new thing and want to participate more in that mealtime. So, and I have not given my child wine, but the wine glass she can use anytime. And then a few more tips for mealtime. Oh, Brittany, you have a comment?
I do. Sorry, I was trying to unmute myself and it wasn't working. Another cup that is kind of similar to like the wine glass, but it's actually really great for little hands, are those shot glasses. And it's so true though. Oh, Annie, sorry. And because it's so great for little hands and it's such a small opening for them to not become overwhelmed with the liquid. And it's also really fun for them because they're fun. They're fun colors, they're small, then they think it's for them.
So just side tangent onto that. I should have put a picture. I do have pictures of my 5-year-old when she was an infant. When we first started introducing cup drinking, I was giving her a shot glass. And this was when she was an infant, so she, not toddler, so a lot smaller. And that shot glass opening was the perfect size opening that she could pick up the glass. And you can get plastic ones. It doesn't have to be a glass shot glass, but she could pick up the cup glass, shot glass. And it was small enough opening that she was able to drink from it and manage the liquid coming out of it without it spilling all over her. So, for infants, if you're trying to just explore the concept of drinking from an open cup and maybe trying different types of liquids besides what they're used to with, perhaps milk, those are different ways to do that. And then they're kind of fun too. So some more tips for mealtime routines. So removing some of the distractions. We mentioned before about a red flag. If your child the only way they'll eat is they have to have their iPad or their tablet in front of them, or they have to be engaging in something that is not related to the actual meal itself. We want to try to eliminate that. Now that is different than sometimes in feeding therapy, we will use those things as motivators, but our end goal is to phase them out because we want to get rid of those distractions. It just depends on where the child's at. So if you are, if your child has gone to feeding therapy before, or if you do go and do that, you may see that utilized sometimes, but at the home, we suggest, try to break those habits. And also practice makes progress. Stay patient, stay consistent. Change is hard. Change is hard for adults. Change is even harder for our tiny mini adults, our little children. And we are creating new habits with these mealtime routines. If you don't already have some of these routines in place, it is creating a new habit, which takes time to do. The other thing is to be aware of your language that you use when talking about food and eating. So we want to try to avoid power struggles with our kids. And all of my parents in this presentation we all know what that is. We want to try to avoid placing demands or pleading to our kids to eat. Please just try this. Oh, you have to try this. Because I guarantee you, they're just going to say no. And that's where you enter in that power struggle. And it's really tough to win against a 2 or 3 year old with a power struggle, when you're in a power struggle. Instead, we want to focus on features of the food. Try this, it's really crunchy. Or this, I taste really chewy or sweet, or that tastes sour. So talk about the features, not really placing too much demand on it. We also want to avoid ultimatums such as, if you don't eat this, you're going to go to bed. Because if it's a food that our child is really averse to, or a food that is definitely non-preferred, they will choose to go to bed. And so that it will just end up with a frustrating situation for all. Instead, we want to praise what our child did well. We want to provide an encouraging or unexpected reward. And this doesn't have to be a food reward. It doesn't have to be, eat your carrots and then you get an ice cream. It could be, let's try some of our carrots and then let's go read your favorite book. So it doesn't have to be food related, or it could be. It just depends on your family. Avoid negative language affiliations with food. We don't want to refer to things as yucky or gross, even if it's things that we personally don't like. We all have our food preferences. We all have things that we like and we don't like. But we don't want to place those negative affiliations with any food when we're trying to get our children to try to expand their diet. Instead, focus on features of the food. So, an example of that, I'll use a very extreme example. I do not like things like oysters or mussels. I don't like the texture. That is my food preference. If we were around somewhere that, say, had that available, if we were at someone else's house and they had it on the table and my children were interested in it, I wouldn't say like, I don't like oysters, those are yucky. I might say, those oysters, they taste very salty. So I'm going to focus on kind of those features. I may not try it, or I might take one for the team and have a bite just to model it. But that doesn't mean I'm going to sit down and have a plate of them, because that's my own personal food preference, but I also don't want to place my food preferences on my children either. The other thing, one of my favorite things to do with kids that I see for feeding is using food affirmations. So talking about how they're an adventurous eater. So, and what does that mean? If you're adventurous in the playground, that means that you're willing to go on the high slide, that you want to climb up that rock wall. So an adventurous eater, you want to try that new food because you're adventurous. Another one I really like is I can learn to eat new foods that taste okay because okay foods still fuel my body. So again, I'm not saying non-preferred. I'm not saying foods I don't like. I'm saying just okay foods. And when I'm working with my kids, if there's a food that I'm trying with, with one of my feeding therapy kids, and I can tell that they don't like it, which is okay. We're allowed to have our preferences. I don't say, oh, that you didn't like it, that food is yucky. I say, well, that was just an okay food, but it still is a good food that can fuel your body. And then I can eat familiar foods that look different because food doesn't have to be perfect for me to eat them. So that, kind of goes back to our foods are always going to have different shapes, different sizes, prepared different ways. And it can be the same, food like an orange, but maybe sometimes it's cut in slices that are wedged. Sometimes they're cut in circle slices. So that's the same food prepared in a different way that looks different. But it still is a food that can fuel their body and that is safe to eat.
I have one point off of the I can learn to eat new foods that taste okay. When a child says that they don't like a food, research says that it takes them 10 times to be able to tell if they like a food or they don't like a food. So you could also say, oh, remember, research says 10 times before we know that we like a food. So I just wanted to throw that like little tidbit out there too for our older kids, because sometimes they need that more concrete thinking.
Yeah, that's a really good point. And I've experienced that with my own children as well. Especially with certain, my kids have very interesting diets. And there are certain kid foods that, are easy to find almost anywhere that they don't like. Like pizza is one of them. My kids don't like pizza. Which kid doesn't like pizza? I feel like most do, but my kids don't. But, we will eat pizza and I am always presenting them with pizza because I know that they're going to have to be exposed to it so many times. And every so often they will try a bite of pizza. And my 2-year-old, who is my adventurous eater, is enjoying it now and is exploring toppings on pizza. And then my 5-year-old, who is my picky eater, she will occasionally try pizza and still decide, you know what, I don't like that. So then she'll eat the pizza crust. So those are just kind of some examples too.
So to kind of wrap up everything that we have been discussing today, there is a really great acronym of talk during meal times. So this was actually developed by a specific food approach. It's called the SOS approach to feeding. It's the sequential oral sensory approach. So what they talk about is keeping things very positive. So all in all, what you say matters and how you say it matters. So you want to talk about what the acronym stand is: talk, avoid, learning, and then keep talk happy and calm. So that's the acronym. So I'll go through each one. So talking about what the food is like. So going through all of those different sensory components. What does it look like? Talk about the color, the shape, the size. Then we can talk about how it smells. Does it smell? Is the smell big? Is the smell little? Is it a sweet smell? Is it a spicy smell? It's not necessarily a hot smell because hot is a temperature, but it could be a spicy smell. Then you want to keep what you're describing the food about, whether it's soft, whether it is bumpy, you want to keep it positive, because if you start to talk negatively, adding in those negative words, ooh, it's gooey, it's gushy, it's slimy, then those all have a negative context to them. And your child will start to associate that negatively, even if that's not what you're trying to describe. So keeping it at face value, oh, it is it is very powdery. It feels very powdery. Maybe it's some crumbs or a powdered donut, something like that. Then you want to avoid asking questions, especially if it's not an option. So instead of saying, can you smell this? You can say, you can smell this. You can smell this. Ooh, what does it smell like? Or maybe they say, I can't smell it. Then you can switch the context there and say, I can smell it. Look, you can smell it too. You want to really empower your child and make them feel like they can do it. So keeping what you're saying very positive and empowering to your child. You want to, we had discussed before about kids saying, oh, I don't like that. I don't like this. I don't eat this. Change the story there. So when you change the words to something, you change the story to it. So instead of having your kids say, I can't, no, you are still learning about that food. You are still learning about that food. So, Brittany said it can take 10 times. Sometimes it can take more for some kids too. Especially if they're very picky eaters. So keeping, numbers aren't everything, but keeping in mind that your child's not going to eat something the first time. Maybe they're not going to eat something the first 5 times, but keeping the talk positives. You're still learning about the food. That's okay. And then that way the child knows that it's not a cutoff. I don't eat that. I don't taste that. I don't touch that. It's, we're still learning to touch it. We're still learning to look at it. So that way there's no end zone here. We don't have an end zone. We're constantly learning throughout life. And we want to empower our kids with that mindset too. And last, but probably the most important, our meal times have to be no pressure. Our kids have to trust us. Our kids have to understand that we're not going to force them to do anything that they don't want to do. So it's our job to allow our kids to have those opportunities to try different foods and to feel comfortable trying those different foods as well. We're not going to force them to try anything, because as soon as they feel pressured, then they're going to start to have very negative associations with mealtime. And then they start to have that fight or flight. Oh, well, I can fight mom and then I don't have to do it because I fight mom. And guess what? That is not a very fun experience for a kid. It's not a fun experience for the parents. And it's not an environment that fosters growth and enjoyment of food. So anything that we can do, if there's one thing that you take away from the conference, it's really just trying to keep things positive, keep things happy, keep things calm. So it's our job to allow those food offers or those food opportunities. And guess what? It's the kids' job to decide how much of that food that they're going to eat. Because at the end of the day, if they eat one bite, we can't force it down their throat. And that would be very negative. But we can create that positive environment. It doesn't happen overnight. It happens through that systematic desensitization of getting them comfortable, getting them in that comfort zone again, and feeling happy and positive and excited to try new foods. Ooh, what are we going to try today? Can we touch it? Maybe they're not going to be ready to go through the entire food continuum in one day, but staying persistent and staying positive is very important.
I just have one thought too, just going back to, how many times it can take a child being exposed to a food before they really learn whether they like it or whether they don't like it. Just going back to the different cultures and what your food diet within the household looks like makes such a difference too. Oftentimes we'll have parents come with complaints about their kids aren't eating, certain things, but then we're always asking, well, what do you eat within your household? What does dinner typically look like for you? And that's what we're really going towards. So what my children are eating within my household is going to look different than someone else's household because of diet preferences and because of different cultures. Just an example of that, I eat more like a Mediterranean type of diet. We eat a lot of fish, a lot of chicken, things like that. And that's very different than a household that maybe eats a lot of pastas. So when we're also, talking about what's in a child's diet, we want to align it with, what the family culturally is eating as well. So I hope that makes sense.
I also wanted to add one more thing too. When we're talking about keeping it positive, and we also want to be aware of like the conversations that we're having at the family table. Children can pick up on a tense discussion between you and your significant other, or even you and your child are talking about school and potentially they didn't have a great day. We don't want to talk about that at the dinner table while we're eating, because children need that positive environment for them to stay calm and not have that fight or flight, to be able to eat and try new foods and all of that. So we want to be aware of our conversations, and we also want to be aware of our tone while we're at the table to create that positive environment for our kids.
That was awesome. And to kind of wrap up the recorded part of our presentation, here are some really good resources. First and foremost, I always say, if you have some concerns of your child eating, very picky eating, that kind of thing, talk to your pediatrician and let them know of your concerns and request a feeding therapy referral. So this, depending on where your concerns are, that might be with a speech language pathologist, or it might be with an occupational therapist. So talk to your pediatrician about that. Progressive Pediatric, the company that we work for, we offer feeding evaluations. We offer virtual screenings, free virtual screenings, so that if you have some questions and you're thinking, is my child qualified? Do you think we need this yet? We do offer free virtual screenings, and you'll see there on the bullet point there a link to our website and to our new patient intake form. The UF Card Center has a really good resources and training. They offer like more tips, top 10 tips for mealtime, other resources like other websites. This is a great book, the Food Refusal and Avoidant Eating in Children, including those with autism and spectrum conditions. That's a book on Amazon. It's a great book, fabulous book for parents and professionals. And then kind of lastly, some family support. Feeding Matters has a lot of good parent groups, and there's also through workshops, there's virtual workshops similar to this one to kind of give you that extra support. And that's kind of what we can offer you. We really hope that this was informative. We hope that you can take away something from this. You're leaving empowered. You're leaving feeling strong and good about trying new foods with your child. And we'll end the recording portion here and take some questions from you guys.